Hello, my name is Denny Paul May, and I'm a due process consultant here at KVEC, and I'm coming to you live from the Holler Studio in Hazard, Kentucky. And today's topic is going to be a continuation of our IEP series, and we're going to today talk about specially designed instruction. Just what is specially designed instruction and what it is that makes specially designed instruction, in fact, special. And so today we're going to be talking about several things that we think will make a difference, will make an impact with the group of students that we're talking about here, are those students that are that have IEPs and that have been defined as having IEPs and working towards state standards. This special design instruction topic has been researched, it has been explored deeply, and certainly we're going to talk to you about some of the things that we feel like will make a huge difference in the outcomes for students with disabilities. So I would ask you this question. What is it that we think specially designed instruction is? What does it entail? Does it match what the needs are that have been identified in the present levels of achievement for each student? Are we making sure that when we choose special design instruction that it is instruction that we can define some verbs from, that are going to be able to be progress monitored? So certainly we're going to talk about all those things, and as we move through we're going to identify what I think is maybe the 6 top ideas around special design instruction. So special design instruction is mandated. It is what a student needs in regards to their disability, and it is mandated through the IDEA law, and it is something that we have to provide each time we develop an IEP. Special design instruction is simply what the teacher does. Based on what you will find in our guidance document, you will find that it says that special design instruction is what the teacher does uniquely for each individual student. So we could say, in a sense, that it is special design instruction is, in fact, unique to each student. So we would have to all agree that as we are making these IEPs, that we would, yes, look to the standards to find the curriculum that the student may need to be exposed to, and we would certainly give them access to that curriculum through accommodations and modifications. But what we're talking about here is exactly what we're doing on the IEP and what we're providing instructionally. So without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about what each of those things might look like. And we've done extensive research and worked with John O'Connor in his book, Great Achievement, Great Instruction, Great Achievement for Students with Disabilities. And John O'Connor helped us to define a list of things to think about as teachers as we tackle this most difficult problem of actually determining what it is that's going to make a difference for these students who have deficiencies, who have needs that are greater than what you would find in just the regular classroom. And certainly we'll go about trying to define that for you today as we move through this topic. The first one that we would like for you to consider as you are preparing your IEPs is that we would consider drastically increasing practice turns and feedback. We know individually that if we work on a particular skill and we are working on that particular skill in the correct manner, and we're receiving feedback from let's say a teacher or let's say a coach, we know that with great likelihood, the more we practice that skill and the more repetition that we apply to that particular skill, the greater increase in our ability to do that skill with proficiency. So that's certainly something we need to think about, increasing the number of practice turns and feedback while we are instructing. Now that's the catch. The catch is that we are providing our students with many times where they can have some practice in the particular skill, and that we could give them immediate feedback, and that our engagement is increased so that the behavior is decreased that we see in classrooms where engagement is not real high. So we would want to certainly look at drastically increasing practice turns and feedback for our students with disabilities, giving them many reps on these skills that they are deficient in, and then also providing them with an opportunity to have access to the standards through accommodation and modification. And the second thought that we have and that we've identified through our study has been to provide explicit instruction. Now, we also have been through some extensive training in explicit instruction. We use this book. The great work of Anita Archer has defined for us what explicit instruction is, and it is really not the opposite of rigor. It is very rigorous when you go about providing this type of instruction to your students with disabilities. This is the type of instruction that we feel here at KVEC that each of your students with disabilities would need in order to see the greatest gains in reading difficulties, in math difficulties, writing difficulties, whatever they may have unique to their experience. We would certainly say let's take a look hard at this type of technique of teaching, and we'll look at explicit instruction here for just a second. We'll kind of try to talk about exactly what explicit instruction is and how it works. So it goes kind of hand in hand with O'Connor's work in that explicit instruction gives a ton of opportunity for explicit teaching, and then it also gives you a ton of opportunity for the student to practice with scaffolding and to have all those practice turns and get that immediate feedback from the teacher. And then it would also follow that you would have some independent practice that would follow. So Anita Archer coined the phrase, I do it, we do it, you do it. And so for students with disabilities, we may exaggerate that just a little bit, and we would look to say, hey, I'm going to demonstrate it for you. So that's going to be the I do it as the teacher. And then we're going to have our students with scaffolding have many practice turns and feedback, many practice turns, many repetitions of this particular skill. And we're going to offer them this. So that would be the we do it part. So it's I do it, then we do it. So the way it would look for students with disabilities would be I do it, and then we do it, we do it, we do it, we do it. And then once they are able to provide you with the evidence that they can do this independently, they can do this skill independently, then you would give them the opportunity to have independent practice with feedback. And certainly this increased ability to get response from your students, increased engagement would have a positive effect on their learning, and it would also have a positive effect on the overall classroom. A third topic that we will talk about as far as special design instruction would be to think about how we're teaching vocabulary. So important for our students that they have those experiences where the teaching is rich in embedded and explicit instruction of vocabulary. They need lots of turns, learning the words, using the words, talking about the words, writing about those words, and forming some type of overall increased vocabulary as they move through these particular grades and particular skill sets that come about in particular areas. For example, if you were to talk about a science class, the embedded vocabulary in that class would be quite different than you would find in an English language arts class. So the focus on that needs to be great especially for kids with disabilities, because they have reading difficulties and they have writing difficulties that would force them, or have not force them, but to have them be instructed in such a way that they would need lots of practice with vocabulary instruction. And the embedded vocabulary instruction would be to make it specific to each category and each scientific class or mathematic class or whatever class it is, so that we would focus on that vocabulary instruction and that we would make that a priority each week as we move through, and we develop these IEPs so that vocabulary instruction is really a big part of what special design instruction is. There are also some things that are left. One of the things that we used to do is we would focus on skill, and we would focus on skill at grade level, or we would focus on skills at the level in which the child was performing. So in the old days, we used to really just focus on where the child's performing. We know that we have a twofold charge in special education to do both. We have to provide instruction in the skills and meet them where they are at their performance level, where their baseline is, and the identification of that baseline is spelled out in our present levels performance on our IEP. But we also have a charge to also provide some instruction, some fill-in-the-gap intervention, if you will, for those students so that they are exposed to the grade level standards on which they're going to be assessed. So we have a twofold charge to not only work on skills where we're deficient, but we also need fill-in-the-gap intervention to help us provide the accommodations, the modifications that we need to make that level playing field for them in terms of grade level performance and how they're doing on, let's say, if the child is in, or the student's in the 8th grade, then they would need some fill-in-the-gap intervention that's research-based, that certainly is rooted in a lot of research and a lot of instructional clinical trials, so that we would know exactly what we need to do for filling in the gaps that they're going to have, because we're working on building skills and getting them closer to grade level, but we're also thinking about providing them access to the general curriculum and the standards. So that's certainly another thing that we would consider as we look at this most important topic of defining what special design instruction is and detailing our IEPs in such a way that we know how we're going to teach. We know we're going to have these kids each and every year that have these difficulties in reading. They're going to have difficulties in math. They're going to have difficulties in writing. And they're basically going to be the same types of difficulties. And then once we're able to pinpoint what each student needs, then we can kind of hone in and design a unique IEP for them and provide them with this special design instruction. The last couple of items for special design instruction have to do with organization. The fifth one would be allowing the student and teaching the student to organize themselves, allowing them through metacognitive instruction to think about their thinking, to reflect on what they've learned, and to be able to organize through the use of scaffolding and the removal of scaffolding as we move forward, to allow them to really reflect on what they've learned, to really organize their learning. If you think about writing a paper and you're gathering your information and you start putting your thoughts down, it certainly would be tragic if you just wrote the paper based on what you'd read previously and then you didn't go back and review and revise and edit and do some of those things. So it certainly is important when we think about these types of instruction that we're teaching our students with disabilities who have some limited skills in the area of reflecting and thinking about what they're learning. And then if we do all of these things, if we are able to provide this engaging classroom, if we're to increase engagement, to increase practice turns and feedback, to provide explicit instruction that is both exciting and embedded with explicit vocabulary instruction, and we're able to fill in the gaps and give them a level playing field by providing them with some research-based strategies that are going to help them to be having access to the general curriculum at their grade level, and we're teaching them skills on how to organize their learning, how to organize their thoughts, and how to reflect on what they've learned, then certainly we could see that this last piece would probably decrease in need, but would maybe still be needed for some students that are working toward these grade level standards, and that would be to implement behavioral systems that kind of work. And we would think about these skills need to be taught explicitly, and they need to be talked about and reflected on. They need to be upfront and so that the classroom is organized in such a way that the students know the expectation, they know what's coming, they know what the accepted behaviors are and what the accepted behaviors are not. And we certainly also teach this element of communication, where we're communicating about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, using modeling, and really focusing on these particular students that would need this type of instruction to be successful in the classroom. Now, we've talked again, specially designed instruction is a piece of the IEP, and it supports our goals, and it is a way in which we're going to instruct our students with disabilities to attain these, not only these annual measurable goals that we've set aside for them based on the needs, but also to provide them with that bridge to grade level performance, and having that access and having that exposure, if you will, to grade level performance. So certainly as we move through and we continue with this series on the IEP, we've looked at developing the present levels performance. We've looked at what a goal is. We've looked at what baseline is. And we certainly know those technical aspects, but as we move through here, today our topic has been specially designed instruction, and it's certainly not something that we want to overlook. It's not something that we want to copy and paste. It's not something that we want to make a laundry list of. Certainly your list could be a little different than my list, or it could be a little different than John O'Connor's list, but these are things that I believe in, things that I think will help students with disabilities achieve and help them get closer to grade level. It will help build that bridge from where they are actually performing on certain skills to get them closer to grade level performance, and that's certainly what we're after. So looking forward, as we move through the rest of this IEP series, we'll be starting to talk about supplementary aids and services and what that may look like. We'll talk about the particular services that are provided, and we'll look at the services page, and we'll continue on with this series as we move through the IEP guidance document. Now, I will also point out to you that if you go to the KDE's website, you will see what we refer to sometimes as the Schoolhouse Document. And the Schoolhouse Document was last revised in 2014. I do hear that a new revision of that, a new edit of that version of the Schoolhouse Document will be out in January of this coming year, 2020. And so we'll be looking actually for that, and certainly you can go back and refer back to the Schoolhouse Document on KDE's website, where it provides you with some topical information, if you will. If you're looking at, let's say you're looking at reading comprehension, you would have what specially designed instruction is and what supplementary aids and services are in terms of those differences. And certainly we know that special design instruction is what the teacher does differently in the classroom for those students that have IEPs. And then supplementary aids and services would be what the student needs to be effective. What do they need? What do they have to have beyond that specially designed instruction? So our next topic will be to define for you special supplementary aids and services, and we will get that for you up shortly, and we'll move through this series on IEP development as we move forward. And thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.